The following is a production of Notch 6 Media. This is the Notch 6 online podcast. Notch 6 is the podcast dedicated to O-gauge trains. Whether you're collecting, operating, or just getting started, Notch 6 is your home for O-gauge news, events, and interviews. Now here is your host, Derek Thomas.
Well, welcome back to the Notch 6 online podcast. It's a very special afternoon here at Notch 6. Once again, we get to bring in Howard Hitchcock, who has changed titles since the last time we did this show. Howard is now the president of Lionel, LLC, and so honored to have you back on the show, Howard. Thanks for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me. This is, we're here at the LCCA convention in Indianapolis, annual convention, and it is a great time. And I love spending time with the collectors and talking about the business and where we're going. And there's been a lot of change over the last year, but I feel like it's been very positive.
Yeah, we're going to dig into some of that change today. We're going to break some exciting news. I'm going to touch on a couple of fun subjects to get started, though.
Sure.
So last year when I brought you onto the show, I assumed you had no background in podcasting whatsoever. That's not the truth. You have an alter ego, also known as Dr. Diecast. Tell me about your radio days before we dive into the fun stuff.
Sure. Well, before my association with Lionel, I was working for Motorsports Authentics, and it was the diecast category, which is now part of Lionel Racing. And we did for, I believe it was a little over 2 years, we did a spot on Sirius NASCAR Radio. It was at the time Channel 128, and we did live radio every Saturday morning. The first year was an hour show, and we expanded to a 2-hour show, and we took live call-in. And we had a panel of people. I was the diecast expert in terms of how things were made and what the process was. We had Buzz McKim, who was a NASCAR historian. We had a guy from Beckett's Magazine who did valuations. And folks would call in and talk to us about their collections and about why they collected and some of the things. And so we bantered back and forth every Saturday morning talking about NASCAR collectibles. So we did some live remotes, which was a lot of fun from racetracks. I was at Texas Motor Speedway, Daytona. Doing live stuff and getting on air, and we took that personality, created Dr. Diecast, and we actually spread it. I did a couple of QVC shows, and so was on that, and that was I was sort of the mad scientist behind making all of the diecast, and so it was fun. It was a great time.
The reason I bring that up is I want our listeners to understand, I have talked a lot on the show about the changes Lionel is going through. To me, it speaks volumes when you have somebody who has been brought up, we were talking last year about you being very product focused and brand focused. That's your passion. It says a lot to me when you're willing to get in there, and no matter what you're doing, whether it's glassware, whether it's NASCAR diecast, you're willing to get in there, you're willing to learn the product, and then you're willing to go out and teach what you know about the product. You've learned enough that you can be considered an expert in that area, and that, to me, that speaks volumes. And the more I talk with your team, and the longer your team is together, the more I talk with them, they're picking up things. And it's exciting to watch from a hobbyist perspective that your team can go out and talk very knowledgeably about the Lionel product now, and that's got to be exciting for you too.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, you touched on a couple of things. Yeah, I have a real passion for product and getting things right, and the brand and marketing and engaging the consumer. And for me, it's a real passion. So when I see things, I'm always thinking of ideas. I'm trying to be creative. I'm trying to push the envelope. I'm trying to make things the best they could be. And I'm trying to espouse that into the folks that I have on my team. I have a great team of people. Some of it's been rearranging seats a little bit and getting their skill sets aligned with the functions in the company that we need them doing. We've brought in a lot of new talent, some of which you've met. We've taken Matt Ashba and redefined his role a little bit. Mike Phillips is a huge addition to this staff. We've identified. We took Mike Reagan just out of service and put him into production. We've built a U.S. based production team. But when I go over, I was just in China a week ago. And I was at the place where we develop all of our chip technology for Lion Chief. And I listened to something and I said, guys, that's not the right sound. The sound should be a screeching sound as opposed to something else. And I said, I often try to challenge them into think about this from the consumer perspective. If you were the person taking this out of the box, what would you expect it to do when it gets there? How would you expect it to perform? What quality level are you expecting for the price you've paid? What is the value for money? What's the customer experience? And that's been a huge push for us this year. the customer experience. We need to treat the customers well. We need them. They need, they don't really need us at the end of the day. There are alternatives. There are other places to go to fulfill that. We don't sell anything that people need to live, eat, breathe, shelter. It's, this is a nice to have. And so the experience has to be top notch, and the customer expectation has only increased and gotten bigger. So from our perspective, we've got to make the best product and have it be right every time coming out of the box. And that's what we strive for. And, I still realize we've got a long way to go. I think we've come a long way from where we were. And we're going to keep pushing that. You touched on getting to understand and learn the product. And that is just how I work. That's how I'm wired. I need to understand how things come together at a very rudimentary level. And then I can take and figure out how to do things better. And I always have been challenged by a couple of things. One is I have never wanted to ask somebody to do something that I either can't do or don't have a basis of knowledge to do. Two, I want to understand that the question I'm asking, I somewhat know the answer to, and you sort of it's like a lawyer in court. You never ask something that you don't already know the answer to, right? And three, I want to know enough to push people to make things better. I am finding it challenging, honestly, as my level of responsibility changes and increases to be all things to all people. And so, unfortunately, whereas like in the world of Dr. Diecast, I was able to know every nuance and part count of every car, I can't get to that level of detail, but I am still very much involved in walking around the production lines, understanding how things come together, understanding how parts interface with each other, because that helps me tell a better story, and that helps me push my people to tell a better story. And I think we've started to do a really good job at that.
How has your day-to-day responsibilities really changed? Because obviously taking on the title of president, there's a lot that comes with that, but I'm curious how much your day-to-day has actually changed, because the reality is you were doing quite a bit, from what I understand, before the title change. You were running day-to-day in North Carolina. Yeah,
I really was, as I was senior vice president, general manager, and really we had the day-to-day responsibilities. It was checking back with New York and keeping them updated and getting involvement in decisions that they needed to make. Now that New York isn't around and all the responsibility sits in North Carolina, it's changed in that most of the decision making sort of just rests with us, the senior management team that sits in North Carolina, and it's very much a team. We have a weekly senior staff meeting where we talk about things, and I get engagement. We're goofing around with an idea that we think is fun, which is we're building a little company store in the front space of the office. We've actually taken the conference room, blown out a wall, moved some things around, and we hope to have that open in early September. But I wanted the team to be involved in that. So we talked a lot about it in the senior management staff, and I really wanted to make sure there was a consensus behind the objectives of what we try to do. And that's how I work. What has changed really is, obviously, you are ultimately now at the end of the day responsible for the larger strategic decisions. And I am spending more time on trying to guide the strategic vision of the company, engaging directly with the investment group that works with us, that keeping them in the loop, and trying to get really ahead of the curve and say, okay, this business is what it is today. I've done so much tweaking with the process and the procedures and nailing that down and getting the right people in the right seats on the bus. How do we now start looking out longer term, 5 years out, and how are we going to drive this business as we move to the future, and how are we going to make it relevant to youth, and how are we going to engage people, and how are we going to get more distribution and awareness for our brand? So those are the types of questions that I find myself struggling with on a daily basis, which take away from some of the passion of the, get involved in the day-to-day product stuff, and I'll see that things get a little further down the track than I want them to, and I'm like, wait a second, did we ask ourselves, where do we want to go with it? Whatever questions are relevant to that specific project. So, but when I need a recharge, when I need to really get engaged and re-energized, not engaged, re-energized, I look to the product, because that's what brings for me, that's what brings the excitement.
Yeah, I can imagine that you get so caught up in the details that And I talked to Mike and some of the production guys about this, that you get so caught up in the details of making it work right that you lose focus of, at the end of the day, you guys are working as hard as you can to put out an incredible product that a bunch of people are going to enjoy. And the reason you're working so hard is because you want to provide the best experience possible for the end user right out of the box. And I can imagine that's difficult at times to pull yourself out of the details and step back and look at, oh my gosh, we're making toys that are really fun for people. And the fact that you recognize that and you can say, okay, I need to step back and refocus and figure out, what's going on. That says a lot to me that you guys get it.
Well, we're trying. I think that we're changing the culture in a lot of ways of the entire company. We are Lionel. We have sort of a responsibility within the space to be the best that we can be. I mean, a 114-year-old brand does not come along every day, and that weights very heavily. It weights very, very heavily on me, and I believe a lot of the staff, about nurturing this brand that has survived for 114 years. You don't find many things that are 114 years old that that are still thriving. And so our decisions have to be very carefully evaluated, and there's a lot of things that new companies wouldn't have to consider, how things integrate and how things work together, and that takes a lot of energy to make sure that all fits. And there's points, there's conversations that we have, hypotheticals, and it's like, well, should we worry about that at a certain point? Or, and we've made some decisions around different things like our tubular track, where we're essentially starting to phase that out at this point. And Fast Track is our platform, and that's where we're going to go. And we need to do that to move forward as an organization, as a company, in our focus. We've changed the way we're building high-end steam and diesels with the make-to-order strategy, which, believe me, from a business perspective, is challenging in certain ways, but will do good things for the trade and will do good things for the customers and the hobby. And it's going to become a situation where there is not enough supply for demand, and that's a good thing. It's going to upset some people that don't get what they want, but there's a secondary market, and that will help fortify that secondary market. So what we're trying to do is lay the groundwork and the foundation for change that will happen all the way through the industry. And I think that's important as we look to the future of this business and how this business is going to have to survive. We don't want to have excess stuff sitting around in the warehouse, and that's a whole change in dynamics in how that business operates.
You guys wrestle with a lot of the same questions that hobbyists have wrestled with for decades, and it's interesting that it's the same questions, but for you guys it's obviously more imperative because it's the survival and how your company thrives is the answers to how you guys choose to answer those questions has a lot to do with how the company does overall. And like I said, it's interesting that everybody is still wrestling with the same basic questions, but the fact that we're wrestling with them means there's activity, and when there's activity, there's movement.
Yep.
And clearly with the Lion Chief system and getting out into different venues, which we've talked with other people about this week, obviously there is movement towards different avenues and really bringing in a younger audience. And on that note, something that I think is really neat that I want to talk to you about is the fact that you and your son and the rest of your family are building a layout at home. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's actually a lot of fun. So when I first was affiliated with Lionel through the NASCAR side of the business, when Lionel acquired that in 2010, the New York office sent me a ready-to-run set, and it was the fire department set, transformer-based set. And I got it to the house, and my son was probably 7 at the time, which would put my daughter at about 5. And so they're young, and it was a relatively intricate set and detailed. And so I broke it out of the box, and we put it up on a table, and we wired it up, and it was electric, and it was fragile with railings. And so I was like, I think most newcomers to the space. It was, this would be a lot of money, sort of, let's be careful with it. And as I let the kids engage with it, I realized that was a mistake. That in order to have the kids have fun with it, they have to have the ability and freedom to sort of engage and interact with this thing. And so very quickly it came down off the table and onto the floor, and then they were allowed to start really fooling around with it. And I also, in that same experience, realized that there is a quandary for people like myself who didn't really understand how to go from what came in my ready-to-run set to the next step. What was that exactly? And a lot of initiatives actually that we've done have come out of that singular experience that I had with my child. Our Track and Power catalog is a direct link to that. We developed that as a selling tool, but also as a development tool for people to understand how to go to the next step. The back of the packaging on ready-to-run sets, I think it was Mike Phillips' second day, and I sat him down in my office and I took the Thomas set, which we had just put out, spun it around, and I said, "Do you see this?" And it was a large swath of white space that was about 2 foot by 2 foot. I said, "This will never happen again." And we developed the back of the Lion Chief box where it starts to talk about expansion packs and how you move and migrate. We have to educate the consumer. If we're going out and reaching a new consumer, that's what has to happen. As far as the layout piece of it, this is a lot of fun. My son, so every Christmas we get a set, and the warehouse sales and stuff that we have, he comes over and he gets involved. He sort of seems to gravitate to whatever I do. So he's a huge NASCAR fan, Jimmy Johnson all the way. His room is decorated up. He's got autograph stuff everywhere. He's as a kid, he's had some really great experiences. As an adult, he's had some really great experiences, actually. But so he comes over, and he sort of thinks he rules the roost. He comes into my office, makes himself right at home, gets himself a soda out of the fridge, whatever. He starts walking around. He'll start talking about things, playing with all the stuff in my office, which again, as a kid, it's a great experience. But we talked about taking and a couple of these sets sort of started to pile up, a couple of things from the warehouse sale, and it was like, we got to do something with this. What would you like to do? And he's like, well, I want to build one of those big things that you run at the... I said, well, I don't know if we're going to quite get to that level, but I said, let's try doing something. So over this last holiday, we have a sort of bonus room space in the house. In North Carolina, we don't have basements, we go up. So I actually have a third floor bonus room. And I drew up a little plan. I'm pretty handy with stuff like that. I build a lot of things. So I drew up a plan and created a perimeter type situation where we've got a perimeter track system with 45-degree turns, and then a little larger space where you can do some things. And I kind of, not really knowing what I'm doing, wanted to sort of muddle through this. This goes back to the learning by doing thing.
Sure.
I kind of wanted to muddle through it to sort of figure it out, because that to me is a way of understanding like some of the challenges and stuff. And so I spent a lot of time out in the driveway nailing together these panels and bringing them upstairs, carrying them up to the third floor, one of which I didn't calculate the curve on. I had to take it half apart. Got it up there over the break, put it together, and really didn't go very heavy scenic. It's mostly covered with sort of a artificial turf. Laid the track down on it, and I went with a lot of remote switches. Not getting into the advanced control systems yet, but really just trying to understand the basics and, curves and twists and turns and bridges and tunnels and, elevation, and trying to figure out how all the things work. So he and I sort of, we started to use a track planning program, and I was like, let's just sort of spread track out and see what happens. And so we wound up getting into a pretty complex web of stuff. Now with summer, he's doing sports and outside all the time, and of course I'm working. So it sort of has stalled a little bit, but as the weather gets cooler and we're inside a little bit more, I can see us spending some more time on this. But it's basically 12 by 12, in dimensions, and this year I see us getting some adequate power to it, and really running some more trains. I'll put a little switch yard in. I'm thinking about trying to do an underground type switch yard type thing. But it's a lot of fun, and he's got the accessories, and he's got play value, he's got imagination, and it shows you that when you bring this to life for kids, they will come along, and there's little zombie characters that are hanging off of the burning switch tower. It doesn't really logically make any sense, but he has a great time with it.
Do you see him combining his toys in terms of, is he into Legos and stuff like
yeah.
that? So are you seeing crossover in terms of Legos and die-cast are getting brought into the Lionel world to create, what amounts to a giant playmat?
Yep, exactly. He does, absolutely. He brings along little figures and little animals and different things, and cars. He's got loads. He has got buckets of 64 scale NASCAR, and so they come out onto the track and and around the area. So. Yeah, he absolutely does. But it's a great experience. I get to spend some time with him, which I don't get to do enough of. Obviously, maybe not obviously, but with the responsibilities of the job. My daughter will come up and play around a little bit with us. She's not as into it, but we'll spend a little time with Dad and fool around upstairs with the train sets. I think actually what's so cool is most of what we own is Transformer based, and now that, I've been exposed to all the Lion Chief stuff and
Sure.
all the things you can do there, I'm like, we got to get some Lion Chief stuff, because this is, that we can interact with each other as opposed to like having one lever and, one transformer and powering it that way. Because I didn't separate loops with power systems and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, it's been a great experience. It's actually written up in the Lion Cub. He's a junior member of the LCCA. We signed him up at the last November warehouse sale.
Okay.
He and Al hit it off. He knows Al Colas, and
Who doesn't know Al Colas?
That's right. No, he talks about Al like he's his buddy, and I'm like, oh, all right, yeah, that's good.
Right.
So it's a lot of fun. He loves it. He waits for the magazine to come there. He thinks he's a little writer now. He's been featured a couple of times. So it's become the Hitchcock story in that little magazine.
It's so cool to hear that you guys are doing it together, because it's always been the impression that the upper management, and like I said, I think you and I touched on this last year, the upper management is understands Lionel as a business, but they don't understand Lionel as a hobby. And as a hobbyist, shedding the media side of things for a minute and just talking as a hobbyist, how cool is it that the guy who's leading the company that we care so much about is going home and building a layout with his son, because that's an experience that so many of us have shared over the years. And I know for a lot of the older folks in our hobby, that was what they did growing up, is dad and them built a layout. Mm-hmm. And that's what I did. Dad and I built a layout. And to hear that that's how you're learning is through that experience with your son just warms my heart. And I don't mean that to sound cheesy, but how cool. And I'm so excited for you guys. And that's, like I said, it's really exciting. What we're really here to talk about today, though, is some big news. And this is club-related news. Yeah. And this is the first time we're talking about this. The memo just came down today that what we're about to talk about is going to happen. So, again, the Notch 6 listeners are the second group to hear about this. And I'm sure the news is going to get around here in the next couple of days. But can you kind of explain to our listeners in a nutshell what is about to happen with the Lionel Railroaders Club? And maybe we can work through this a little bit and look at why and what the future looks like a little bit.
Sure. Well, in a couple hours, we're going to have the Lionel presentation here at the LCCA convention, and we've tried to put together a whole little fun, interactive type event, which I think, well, as I said last night, is either going to go tremendously well or crash and burn. But hey, we tried something new. But what I am going to announce is that we are going to be merging the LRRC with the LCCA, which I realize is, for LRRC members, really big news. And the club, for us, we've looked at every part of our business. We've done a lot of evaluation on, and it really comes down to how do we provide the best experience we possibly can as Lionel for our collectors, whether they be LCCA members, LRRC members, or members of another club. And we really feel that the LCCA is doing so much aligned with the initiatives of Lionel. They are trying to engage the youth. They are active in events. They do these wonderful conventions on an annual basis. They engage the collectors. They are out. They do charity connection stuff. They are out spreading the messaging of Lionel and Lion Chief and all of the positive things that we are doing. And unfortunately for us, for Lionel, in all of the moving around and parts and pieces and business changes, the LRRC has sort of become a bit of a forgotten group of people. And that has not been intentional. It's just been a function of there have been so many priorities to address. They have not been the highest of the priorities, which is a mistake because they are our core constituents. And so we feel that by combining marketing efforts between what Lionel is doing and what LCCA is doing, the more robust experience this is going to bring a more robust experience to LRRC. The great news is it has some benefits for LCCA, and it has benefits for LRRC. So the combination of the two is stronger than the one. We're going to be able to take, and some of the benefits that Lionel only gave to LRRC is going to now be spread across to the LCCA. And of course, now the LRRC is going to receive, more content, better engagement, online access, collector community, trading places, things that we didn't do. And this isn't final. We haven't gone through all of the details. There's going to be, this is going to be big news that doesn't have a lot of detail behind it. In the next couple of weeks, there's going to be communications about the exact steps, because we've got different groups. There's crossover between these clubs. There's some percentage of people that are in both places. And so what does that mean to them? There's some that are only LRRC members. It means something different to those guys. And but one of the things that we have talked about with Mike Phillips and myself and Al Colas and Dennis DeVito is, how do we bring the LRC folks in, make them feel warm and welcome, really go out of our way to message to them the benefits of what's going on. But not only that, how do we not lose the LRRC identity completely? It's not an independent club any longer, but what if it were a little collection of product that happened so that those longtime members could continue to have an association with LRRC, yet be part of the LCCA, which is this much bigger, broader, better experience? And honestly, because the LCCA is singularly focused and are driving our business forward, Lionel itself is engaged with the LCCA regularly, and so actually has a close connection to what we're doing. And I think that, I think after the initial sort of perhaps shock of the news, I think when people really sit back and look at it, they're going to realize that this is a great benefit for them as LRRC members.
Very good. So the big news here is that the LCCA and the LRRC is merging. And like I said, this is a very vague overview at this point. Lionel and the LCCA are actively working on the details. We just found out this morning that this was even going to happen, even though you guys have been working on it for a little while. Everything just got somewhat finalized this morning. So make sure you watch the Lionel and the LCCA website, lionel.com and lionelcollectors.org. And I'm sure Lionel and the LCCA will both reach out to both groups and walk everybody through this process and make sure, like I said, the point being is not to offend anybody here, but the point being is to bring the LRRC members into the LCCA and make them feel very warm and welcome. So details on that are forthcoming. Yep. You and I could talk forever. It's always great to have you on the show. I want to wrap up with this question, and okay. I asked you this last year. Last year I asked you, where do you want to be a year from now? And that was exactly a year ago that we talked when you were in Chattanooga. So I'm going to ask you the same question again. Last year the response was, I'm focused on cleaning up processes, moving people around, and now that has happened. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about, where do we want to be in July 2015? What are some of your goals for the next 12 months?
Well, I think the goals are always evolving, but I think that the brand will be positioned with some new product offerings to further expand our presence to new audiences. So in other words, we'll be reaching out with more toy-based, play-based product forms that will probably be available in mass, and that is with the intention of trying to drive new audiences. I'm talking kids, real play value here. A lot of it being plastic toys and things, and exposing them to the Lionel name, and then sort of bringing them up and through the process. Something that was missed a decade ago, where we needed to make that connection to the next generation, and that's what we're looking at. I think we'll have expanded our digital space, and we've got we have already Battle Train the app out. Lionel Tracks, which is a great aggregation of content. We will have launched a new Lionel.com, which will be interactive. It'll be a place for information. I think the transition of people and places and things will largely be completed by that point. We will be shifting more of our product line over to a make-to-order strategy. We will have, by that point, backfilled some categories we've neglected over the course of time, like accessories. We will expand things that are working. We hopefully will continue to add a couple of new licenses to it. And I think it's becoming a more refined and well-oiled machine that is actively out engaging the marketplace, advertising, promoting, and being the brand that we should be, not being afraid to be a big, bold 114-year-old Lionel. There's actually some really cool stuff coming out with the Lincoln Park Zoo in Chicago. There's a connection there. So I think you're going to start to see Lionel more integrated into daily culture, daily life. so that we can continue to envelop new audiences and bring them along on this wonderful journey. And that's my goal, to have expanded the world of Lionel and to expand the journey.
Well, I'm sure we're going to catch up with you in Boston and ask you how you guys did on your goal. You heard it from the man himself, Howard Hitchcock, president of Lionel. Howard, thanks so much for your time.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to Notch 6, the only podcast dedicated to O-gauge trains. You can find every episode on our website, notch6.com, or on iTunes and Stitcher. We'll see you again soon. Until then, be sure to keep it in Notch 6. The following has been a production of Notch 6 Media and is intended for private use only. This show may not be copied or redistributed without express written consent. This show copyright 2014, all rights reserved.